Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this third webinar in the series presenting the survey results of the European Companies Survey. So we're very happy to have you here this morning for this webinar Ask the Expert, which will focus on the use of skills. So the European Companies Survey, which is a joint survey between Eurofound and Cedefop, and which was the fourth wave of it, was launched in 2019. And this survey aims at getting a better understanding of workplace practices in companies in the European Union. There are four main issues that which was concentrated on in the survey. So work organization, human resource management, skills use, skills development, direct and indirect employee involvement. So last week we had a discussion on employee involvement, and today we're going to look more into the skills use and how companies make use of skills use and what it actually means for employee well-being and for company performance. So I'm very happy to be able to have on the panel today Gijs van Houten and Giovanni Russo, who are the authors of the report, and they will present to us some of the results coming out of the survey. And to discuss these results and ask some good questions, I'm very happy also to have Isabel Coenen from FNV, Dutch trade union, with us today to debate these results with us and what it means for workers. And then I'm also very happy to have Pär Lundström from the Swedish Installation Federation, the Swedish employer organization, that as well will discuss with us, what do the results tell us and how can we make use of these results and what does it mean for future action. So I won't say much more, just that once we've had the presentations and we had debates with Isabel and with Pär, then we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. So the way that you can ask questions either to our experts or to Isabel and to Pär is by putting your questions and comments into the live chat. These comments and questions will then be fed to me, and I will put them to the relevant person and try to get a debate going. After we've had our webinar today, the recording of the webinar will be available on Eurofound and Cedefop's website, but that doesn't mean that you can just say, okay, fine, I can watch it later. No, please stay with us and ask some nice questions and discuss with us a little bit about how we can make use of these results. So we are in extremely strange times, with basically most of the European Union countries, member states, being in some kind of lockdown again. And so one can say, okay, why should we discuss skills use? Well, I think there are some very, very good reasons why we need to discuss it exactly today. I think the first reason we need to discuss it is that on the 1st of July, the European Skills Agenda came out about how companies can and individuals can make better use of skills opportunities, how we can create skills opportunities. So that's kind of a more structural issue. On the second is that if one just Google 10 main challenges for human resource management. Training and skills development comes out as one of the main challenges for human resource management in companies in general. And the third reason is then what we're discussing in a very contextualized situation of today is how can we use the downtime of a large part of our workers in today's economy to reskill them, to upskill them. And we had exactly the same discussion in the 2008 crisis, how to combine the decrease in working hours for some of the workers with the possibility of them to retrain, reskill, or upskill. And I think we're having the same kind of discussion today, and it's a very difficult discussion to have and put these ways of working into action during a crisis situation. But maybe if we can see the benefits of it, there'll be a little bit more of a drive to actually take it a little bit more serious this time. So those are some of the reasons why I think at this point of time, discussing skills use is a very relevant time for that. Now, with this, I would like to kick off the webinar and ask Giovanni to introduce us to what does the European Company Survey tell us about skills use. Please, Giovanni.
Thank you, Maria, for the nice introduction to the survey. Okay, let me start you off from where we left off at the launch event. This is the grouping of European establishment in fortnight group, and we have one on the Northeast, which is doing relatively well on workplace well-being and employment performance. And this is the high investment, high involvement group. And the last webinar last week, we looked at the involvement part. So today we look at the high investment and the high investment part, which is basically about investing in skills and in the development of worker, but not only that. So let me provide a framework through which let's say to exemplify how skills might impact performance. There are two channels. One is the so-called task performance, which has a part, let's say, linked to the job description. So these are the tasks I do. So part of this task performance can be mandated through the labor contract, because part of the your performance can be described in the labor contract through the task you need to do. But how you do this task, the going above and beyond the call of duty, understanding what needs to be done at a certain point, these are all voluntary elements of the task performance, and as such, they cannot be really mandated through the labor contract, so they need to be induced through the right use of incentive. And then there is another form of performance, which is called contextual performance, and these are all the behaviors, voluntary behaviors, that are useful for the correct functioning of the workplace. This consists of helping colleagues, sharing information, providing ideas on how to improve the workplace. Now, contextual performance is entirely voluntary, so again, it cannot be mandated through the enforcing the labor contract. So it needs to be incentivized as well. So now, when we look at the conceptual framework that we used to design the questionnaire, this conceptual framework was based on a broader, let's say, model of how skills become performance through these two channels I just showed you. It's called the AMO model, where A stands for ability, which means it's a broader definition of ability, which including skills and knowledge. Then there is motivation, so you need to motivate, workers need to have the motivation to use the skills. And then there is the opportunity part, which means that worker needs to have the opportunity to deploy the skills. So when we look at the at our questionnaire, we have these three blocks which loosely correspond to this three part of the AMO model. We have job complexity and autonomy, so it is an issue of job design, so this is the opportunity. We have workplace behaviors and motivational levels. This clearly refers to motivation. And then we have the training and skills development, which is the part linked to the building of a solid skill base. These three elements cut across the questionnaires, basically. These are the three, let's say, so when we look at these three parts, these are also the groups good on these three elements are also the ones overrepresented in the investment and involving group. So they are linked to the initial graph I showed you. So let's look at the autonomy part. So we will see that what we need for autonomy are issues of job design. I'm sorry, I did something strange with my, okay, an issue of job design. So jobs needs to design in such a way that they allow the fraction, a large fraction of the employees to have control over the way they implement the scheduling of their task, how they implement the work. Then there is also a fraction of employees having to solve unfamiliar problems. So this is problem solving. These two things together gives you an idea of how much autonomy, opportunities to deploy the skills workers have. And then, of course, there is the adoption of autonomous teams. But this is not only, this is not enough. We also have a fourth variable, which is managerial support. Here, it is about how the managerial role is understood in the establishment. So we have establishment in which managers are supposed to control for what that employees do what they need to do. But there are also establishments in which managers are let's say, setting out the environment in which employees can perform. Okay, so we identified using latent class analysis 3 groups here. You have one group which is basically good on all these counts. So they have a higher percentage, or very high percentage of workers engaged in problem solving and with autonomy of scheduling their tasks. They do have autonomous teams, and they also have managers supporting the workers. Then we have a second group, which is lukewarm in these aspects. They do have managers supporting that say that they support the autonomy of workers, but then this autonomy and problem solving are only given to only a fraction of the workers, not a large one, let's say anything between 20 and 60, and they also have a relatively high incidence of autonomous team, but not as high as in the previous group. And then we have a third group, which is we call command and control, but could also be an arm length relationship. So it's a very contractual relationship with workers, in which managers understand the role as a controlling one. They control that workers do what they need to do. They have a very low incidence of worker with autonomy and problem solving, and actually they don't use autonomous team. Actually, they don't use team at all. We'll see that these groups actually correlate in a way with outcomes. We have a very small group doing well on all the counts. Then we have the selective group, which is a relatively large group, and then we have unfortunately a largish group, which is let's say having this command and control structure, this traditional way of managing people. But those doing, we see that as it moves through the groups, this approach on complexity and autonomy is actually, when supported by management, is also linked to performance in terms both of well-being of the workplace, but also in terms of the financial performance. The second group is training and skills development. So this is the building of the solid skill base. Again, we have a number of variables that help identifying the 3 groups that we find through latent class analysis. For one thing, we have is the managerial. Again, we have the importance of managerial support, but in this case, it's a different sort of managerial support. That's a managerial support for training. So in this case, the 2 polar examples are managers that allowing training only when the work schedules allows for it, and others are managers which they reshuffle the work schedule in order for training to take place. Then we have another, let's say, emanation of management is how many workers of the fraction, the incidence of workers in jobs requiring continuous training. And then we have the fraction of workers engaged receiving training or on the job training, and the perceived importance of training. Now, this is a combination of elements. So we ask establishment about the importance of training for various aspects. For example, for morale, for developing the skills in the current job, for developing skills in other jobs. So this favoring job rotations, but also career advancement. And in order the importance of training to articulate suggestions on how to improve the efficiency of the workplace. Again, we have these three groups. The first one is doing well on all the counts. The second one has, again, managers supporting skill development, but then again, this is offered only to a fraction of workers. And then again, in this group, managers say they support training, but then again, only a fraction of workers, a limited fraction of workers is in jobs requiring continuous training. These are also the establishment in which management is lukewarm about the perceived importance of training. And then we have a final group where managers deliver training only when the work schedule allows for it. They have a very limited, very small percentage of employees in jobs requiring continuous training, through which that training is provided and to which on-job training is provided. And again, this group of establishment have very little perceived that training is not really relevant or not much important. Again, we have a small group doing well on all counts. This is the blue dot. And then we have the red dot, which is the selective group, so the group in the middle. And then we have a largest group, which is the green group, which is they deliver only limited training and allow only for limited skills development. The establishment attitudes toward this element, training and skill development, you see is also correlated with the workplace well-being and establishment performance, clearly so. So these are also, of course, the establishment in the blue dot are also establishment in the involving and investing group we saw at the beginning. Finally, I take you through the last group, which is the motivation part. So this is how we tried to understand how the employment relationship is handled, because a lot of these behaviors are voluntary. So we need to understand whether the establishment wants to rely on them, wants to trigger them, and how they go about it. So here we grouped two sets of questions. So the first three sessions are about the behavior, the desired behavior, and we had three of them, which are, let's say, the most obvious one. There might be more, but we focused on the most important ones. So it is a scale of importance, and so we have how important it is to help colleagues, staying longer when needed, and making suggestions for improvements. Again, we have 4 groups here. I have to say these are very interesting 4 groups. Okay, let me finish the description of the variable, and then I'll talk you through the groups. Then there is the second part. These are the desired behavior, which are in this case voluntary, and then there are the way to incentivize them. This is the motivational part, and it is on how often scale. So we look at a different way to induce this behavior. We have 4 different, we identify 4 different classes, or if you want, of way to induce behaviors. One is through offering monetary rewards. The other one is to rely on a strong mission and vision statement. Another one is the provision of challenging work, and the last one is the provision for training and development activities. You see, this is where the sometimes the model we used, the AMO model, ability, motivation, and opportunity, seems to be very clear-cut in its 3 components. But these slides clearly shows that sometimes the motivation and opportunity cannot be neatly separated. Sometimes having the opportunity to do so also is the motivation to do so. So these, let's say, 8 variables identify 4 groups. which can be divided in two broader classes, the first three and the last one. The first three are actually a balanced group. The last one is an unbalanced group, and I'll explain what I mean. So if you look at the first group, the high, these are establishments in which they understand that all these voluntary behavior are important. So they put a price on them. And they also engage with the motivational levels very much. They use all kind of motivational levels, either very often or at least reasonably often. So this is the reasonably offers is this plus/minus sign. Then there is a moderate group. So this is a moderate group in the sense that they understand more or less that these behavior are important, but they are not that committed to attain them. They match this lukewarm approach toward the behavior with a, let's say, a less committed use of motivational levels. So you see, they all stay in the sometimes rarely part of the scale when using these monetary levels. Then there is a low importance group, if you want, when they say these behaviors are not that important for us, and we don't use very much, very often, these monetary incentives. So this is an arm's length relationship, very much based on what is written in the contract. So these are all balanced, if you want, because in the first group, they want more, but they induce more using a lot of monetary incentive. In the second group, they want a little and they induce a little. And in the third group, they don't want much from employees, but they don't induce a lot. So these relationships are all balanced, if you want. The last one is an imbalanced relationship, because these are establishments which want certain behaviors through which skills are deployed, but on the other hand, they don't incentivize them. So this brings an imbalance, if you want, because they want a lot, but they don't deploy the levers, or they don't use the levers that could be used to induce this behavior. If we look at how these behaviors materialize, or what are the consequences of this management of the employee relationship, we'll see that there are the four groups are again neatly on this northeast, southwest, say diagonal. The green group is the group with high expectations and investments, let's say motivation, using a lot of motivational levels. The reddish dot is the group with low expectations, but also, you know, very little use of motivational levers. And in the unbalanced group is the dark blue group dot. So it's just a smallish group, but then we have a very big group with let's say moderate expectations and a moderate use of the motivational levels. So this brings me to the conclusion. So I think the all in all, skill deployment, or the ability to capitalize on worker skills, is a matter of wanting it. So approving the behavior linked to the use of skills, not only approving but also inducing them, providing the opportunities for that to happen, and this is a form of autonomy and involvement. Involvement is one of the channels through which, you know, these the workers contribute to the well-being and to the functioning of the establishment, relying and leveraging on their skills. It's a matter of motivating them. And again, autonomy is, yes, an opportunity, but is also a way of incentivizing behavior. Then there is the development of skill development is also a form of incentive. It's not only a way of creating a solid skill base. And then there is an important element, which is supporting. Managers need to support all this because they have, yes, to design the jobs in such a way that they do provide autonomy and everything, but they also have to support workers in their performance. They have to create the environment in which workers can perform, and they also have to adapt the let's say the work schedule in such a way that training and things and other skill development activities can happen. So managerial support is crucial. Not only this, but managers need to be supported in their action too, because it's not easy to do all this. It's not easy to do all this, especially during when there is a pressure due to the current production activities. So managerial support is supporting managers as much as workers is just as important as supporting workers in their training and skill development. I thank you for the attention, and this is all for today for the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Giovanni. So, I mean, some very clear results in terms of where worker well-being and where company performance actually can be upgraded in terms of job complexity and autonomy, in terms of training and skills development, and in terms of behavior and incentivizing a certain kind of behavior and how to motivate this. So I would like now to go to our experts, so to Isabel and to Pär, and ask you maybe, are you surprised about these results? Do they stand out as being something that you would recognize, not recognize? What kind of reflections would you actually put to these results in terms of the combination in terms of how to invest in workers and how to make use of this investment and how to motivate this use? And especially, what would you actually recommend to get about positive results for worker well-being and for company performance? So I would like each of you to react to these results that have been just presented. Maybe also other issues that you've read in the in the overview report of the European Company Survey, and especially if you have some good questions for the authors of the report, that would be most welcome. And I would also like to incentivize the audience to keep on getting your comments and questions into the live chat so we can take them later on. Please, Isabella. So what's your take on this?
Thank you for this nice presentation. We are very happy with this research. The report shows that companies who offer training and where workers are really involved in the design of training and the voice of the workers is really heard are more successful. And in addition, what's important, the well-being of workers is higher. Effective access to training is important for all workers, and that means an offer that matches the learning opportunities of all workers, and that also means time to be able to train in the form of paid training leave, and offer also good guidance and support, what also is in the report. Yeah, however, the report shows that there is a lot of work to do, and that's more important now in this time of Corona. And we as trade unions found it important that there will be a more frequent data collection on employers' financial and non-financial contribution to employee training. And what there is very important, the way where workers are involved by training policy. The best would be to have this data every year, linking to the implementation of the Pact of Skills. But it's only working when there is close monitoring, so that's very necessary. And I will propose that the next European Company Survey could support this monitoring. And what's very important is that in the next survey, also the voice of the workers is better heard, and that more employee and trade unions representatives are involved. And I like to know in the next report of we can do research, what is the role of trade unions and employee representatives to stimulate workers to learn and to train and to use the possibilities. I like very much that it's an item for the next survey.
Okay, thanks a lot, Isabel. So useful data to kind of highlight what's going on, and you would like the data a little bit more often to make sure that there's a proper monitoring. So Pär, what do you say to the results? Do you recognize it from your work in terms of how companies organize work, how they organize skills development? Please, Pär.
Yeah, reading this report was very nice, since Sweden and Finland comes out very well. And growing up in north of Sweden, close to Finland, I can also recognize many of the sort of cultural traits that lies behind the belief in autonomous groups, motivating individuals. And also what stands out in the report is the close contact between employees and the boss. So there's constant coaching talk, trying to solve common problems. We also have incentives to improve the workplace constantly. So I recognize this, and maybe the European debate on vocational training should look a little bit more to the Nordic light, because I feel that we had a debate that was very strongly connected with German-influenced apprenticeship schemes. And I know that there are problems with apprenticeship schemes that we haven't really discussed. And maybe we should move the focus to lifelong learning in the workplace and look at the Nordic examples. And one thing that I actually miss in this excellent report is also the discussion on career change. Reskilling and upskilling is, of course, very important. But we also need to have a discussion on the ability to change career midlife. And we have a very interesting example in Sweden. The property company of IKEA, Ikano, offered a couple of training places for women midlife. And I think they had more than 250 applicants to 16 places. So this has been picked up by other organizations offering women midlife to change career and to attract them to the construction sector. Since we are a very male-dominated sector, we need to attract women, and we think this is possible midlife. So we need to develop these schemes. But also together with Eurofound, which is our European organization for electrical contractors, we are looking for the business opportunities post-COVID, because we can see both the Green Deal and the renovation wave as huge challenges when it comes to reskilling and upskilling. And we can also regrettably see that we have a lot of funds, both on the EU level and in Sweden, but it's very hard for small companies to access these schemes. The bureaucratic barriers are usually very high. You need to be a very skilled consultant to be able to unlock these funds. So we need to look at platform solutions to upskill and reskill people in small companies. I think this is maybe the largest challenge we have. And finally, I talked to Giovanni because it would be interesting to have a special report just focusing on the Nordic countries and comparing them, because even if we have similar results in this report, there are also huge differences in how the labor market is organized and how vocational education and training is organized. So a special report focusing on the Nordic countries is something I would like to see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pär. Before I give the word back to you, Giovanni, and to Gijs, I have one question for you, Pär, that came in from, I think it's for you, at least I'll try to put it to you. So it's Duncan, and he has a question also, which is a little bit about the difference between the Nordic countries and some of the other countries. And he asked, why is there such a big difference between the proportions that develop skills predominantly through learning by doing in the Netherlands and Sweden, on the one hand, and Ireland and UK, where it's only 13% on the other hand. So there's kind of more than double percentage of skills development, which is by learning by doing I would say in Sweden at least, compared to the Ireland and UK. Do you have an explanation for this, or maybe Giovanni can complement?
No, but both by personal experience and the fact that my daughter is currently living in Scotland. The managerial style in the UK and in the Anglo-Saxon world is much more top-down, whereas in the Nordic countries it is independent individuals, independent groups trying to solve problems together and helping each other to advance the value of what the company is producing. So there are rather huge cultural differences, and you could also see it actually now in how the countries are dealing with Corona. In Sweden, the government gives a lot of the decision making to the individuals and to the society. Here's the information, try to find a solution that works for you. Whereas in the UK, it's much more top down, much harder restrictions. And of course, Sweden had a lot of troubles during the spring, but now it seems to have sort of rooted and everybody takes responsibility for their own situation. So there are differences in culture in how you solve problems. And something that usually stands out when you look at Nordic countries is the level of trust. So I would also like to see a little bit of more Robert Putnam in these studies. How does trust, how does institutions that create trust forward workplace learning?
Okay, thank you a lot. That was also a word that was used a lot last week with regard to employee involvement. That was the word trust. And you came back also to the managerial style that is diverse, and that gets back to what Giovanni was talking about, how to support managers in terms of making some of these issues emerge. Isabel, I'll give you a chance to ask your question directly to Gijs and to Giovanni, and then afterwards I'd like Gijs and Giovanni to get back on some of the, I suppose that Giovanni should go first, get back some of the comments and questions that were raised. But please, Isabel, first, if you could ask your question.
Yes, I have a question for the researchers. There is a lot of research which shows that low-skilled workers participate less in training. And I like to know are companies where employee representatives are more involved in the program and the policy of training, of they are more successful in reach these workers. Because it's nice, but some groups need extra support, more support, good guidance to reach a more higher level and to participate in training offers.
Okay, Giovanni, please. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Maria. I was leaving you finish the sentence. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm first, so I pick the easy ones. I let Gijs handle the difficult ones. So to start, I want to tag immediately on what Pär said about cultures and the Nordic countries. I think that is an important element, the cultural element. And the talk here has been what to do if companies are taking up the slack due to the COVID to retrain their workers or upskill their workers. I think the point here might be that this is a very good moment for companies to sit back, rethink the way they design their jobs, rethink the way they handle the employment relationship, and start building this cultural element that would actually allow them to switch to a different mode of production, a different mode of living industrial relations in their company. Because there is because there is no pressure or very little or reduced pressure from the production side, they could actually use up their times, not so much on focusing on workers and the skills of workers, but actually thinking about how management think about the employment relations, the way they want to design the workplace, how they want to use the workforce. I think this is the cultural element. This is a good moment for managers to sit back and start building or rethinking the cultures in their workplace. Going back to Isabel, I think involvement of employee representations and workers in training, we have looked at that, but we have looked at that in a specific form. We've looked at if establishment in which the employee representation is available, is present, have programs specifically targeted to upgrade the educational levels of low-skilled work or low-educated workers. And we found that more or less about 40%, maybe 30% have such programs, and half of the establishment where these programs are present, the employee representation is involved in the handling of this program. But because this question comes from the employee representations questionnaire, it was difficult to integrate it fully in the analysis. We have this data. We promised we will look at that, because this is for sure an interesting topic. So hi, so now you handle that.
You take the difficult questions, please.
I mean, I'm not sure what questions are left in a way. I mean, I think you both raised interesting angles to have another look at our data and to see what we can do with what we have. And obviously there are limitations to what we can do, because we don't know a whole lot about the composition of the workforce in the businesses that are included in the survey. So as much as we can look at, as Giovanni pointed out, associations between the involvement of ERs and the presence of programs, and maybe even the associations of the presence of those programs with the success of the business, we don't know whether it's because they are more successful at actually involving these lower skilled workers. And I think, I mean, and this is something that definitely warrants looking into more closely in the future. It was a point that was raised last week as well. I think that obviously we're talking about specific groups that are more likely to engage in direct participation, that are more likely to invest in their own skill sets, and we need to look into ways of pulling in those lower skilled workers in participating in employee involvement, as well as themselves taking responsibility and engaging with skill development, because in the end, it's of course a two-way street. I mean, it's managers can motivate and facilitate, but if the workers are not interested, then it becomes very difficult to make it work. And I think I was recently in a different in an advisory group for a different study where I heard about an initiative in the Netherlands from the Dutch Christian Trade Union, who are actually starting training programs to improve the let's say the capacity for voice among lower skilled workers, and particularly targeting at students in lower and mid-level vocational training in the Netherlands. And I think that might be a way to look at it. And so there's a responsibility or an opportunity, depending on how you look at it, for social partners as well, because they could, in a way, help people to be more vocal, which then probably positions them better to express their needs towards the manager, rely less on the trade union to do so, and as a consequence maybe take the conflict out of a lot of discussions. And this is also a discussion that we had last week, that it's really, I think there's a lot of scope for looking for ways that take the tension out of debates. So to move, certain discussions need to be dealt with by social partners, and certain discussions need to be dealt with on the work floor. And in order for discussions to to free up the social partners to focus on the difficult stuff, it would be good if workers are empowered to deal with it's not easy stuff, because none of these interpersonal relationships are easy, but if workers are empowered to at least be able to engage in sort of equal discussions with their manager about how they do their work, but also about the skills they need or the further skills they need to do the job, or maybe how they can use the skills they have better than they are currently doing. So yeah, I thought that was very interesting, and I also think that, well, maybe we can look into it a little bit more based on what we have, but obviously there are some limitations. Similarly, focusing on comparing countries more, our data are only half suited to do so, right? So yes, we can maybe look a little bit more on why certain differences between countries emerge, and I think there's definitely an interest in that. But obviously, our sample sizes would be a lot smaller on each of the country levels, and then particularly if you start to zoom in on companies that use a certain set of practices, you're not left with that much to work with. That's not to say that it might not be an interesting angle to explore further. And if we are to stimulate bigger take-up of the Nordic perspective in the EU debate, then maybe such an analysis would be warranted. I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I know Pär wants to get in, but I think I will take a little bit more. I'll just take one bigger issue that's coming out of the chat, and I'll try to bundle a little bit what's coming out. And it's very much with regard to worker well-being and workplace performance. So we've had several different questions with regard to this. One is, how do you define it? You know, how do you define worker well-being? How do you define company performance? So that would be, I think that the audience would be interested in hearing very briefly what it means. And related to that is, is a question that Paul raises, which is the chicken and which is the egg when we look at behavior and company results, employee happiness. So you guys, you were getting a little bit into this issue about how can we unbundle how these things come together. So it's the chicken and the egg when we look at behavior and company results and employee happiness, what causes what, basically. And then the last comment that comes back on the issue about worker well-being and company performance is there's a member in the audience that says, okay, why do we always need to look at workers' well-being as being tied to company performance? It is okay to look at company performance alone, but it seems that worker well-being alone is not that interesting without linking it to company performance. What do speakers think about that? So why don't we look at these elements by themselves? So these are the kind of questions that are coming in around concepts of worker well-being and company performance. So maybe I'll let you go first, Pär, because I think you have a question as well. But I think we need to be a little bit brief because we've got 5-6 minutes to go. So Pär, if you hit it off, then you can raise your question, your comment as well at the same time.
I can answer it with an example. The best employer last year in Sweden was a company called Midrock. They have managed to combine worker well-being, structured learning processes with a good outcome for shareholders. So Midrock is a good case study to do. Another perspective is the bounce back of the Lehman Brothers, because I think Sweden was the country quickest to get back. And I think that's related to our system for adult education. And I know Finland is also doing very well with adult education. So we need to look at this relationship between public undertakings and businesses undertakings when it comes to reskilling and upskilling. And of course, also the issue of career change that I raised earlier. I have a lot more to say, but I'll stop now.
Okay, sorry. Isabel, you want to say something on the issue about work?
our starting point is the well-being of workers, and when a worker feels good on the workplace, then he's motivated, and he works. And when you are motivated, you are working better, and that's good for the productivity of the company. The results are better. So it's linking together. This is and only focus on productivity is a focus on the short time period, because you need to involve your workers, and when you involve your workers, then they are motivated, they know what they have to do, what they have to learn, what are the possibilities, and then it's the productivity of a company that works better then. So our starting point is the workers, but it's worth for the company to invest in that, because their productivity is more high.
Okay, thank you very much. Giovanni, before you start answering, I would maybe also like, there's Gijs is asking whether you could explain a little bit more about the methodology that you've used, asking whether it's a principal component analysis, or what kind of methodology have you used to group the different types of performance. Please.
Okay, thank you. So let me start off by pointing out that we didn't look at employee well-being. We actually looked at workplace well-being. So this is a survey on establishment and not so much on people. So we look at variables representing the workplace well-being. So on the establishment performance, we have expected profitability. Profitability if it was expected to be profitable. We have expected employee growth, and we have a measure of sales growth over the past year. We put all these together, and we had a sort of an index about establishment performance. On the workplace well-being, we asked establishment whether they had a problem retaining the talent, whether they had an issue of too high leave of sickness leave, and whether they had a problem with low morale, and whether they had a good relationship between manager and employers. So again, this was put together in an index, and we call this an index of workplace well-being. Now, workplace well-being is good for both, in a sense, because if worker stays, usually they stay for a reason. So if they don't, one way for workers to express their disagreement with the management is to take an excess day of illness. So in a way, we looked at a place which is organically functioning well, where both managers and workers are happy. So these are the technical part. This is better explained in the report, by the way. So now, how we grouped companies, we use a statistical method called latent class analysis. Basically, it is vaguely related to factor analysis. It's not certainly principal component analysis. It's something different. We look how the variable underlying the values group, the variable I showed in the tables, actually tend to be represented in the same group at the same time, delivering the same output. So, and now the difficult questions about why do we need to bundle establishment performance with employee well-being? Now, from a personal point of view and from a philosophical point of view, I think that employee well-being could be an end in itself, but that would mean that we need to have a different model of capitalism, if you want to the extent that shareholder value is important. Then we need also to bundle these two things together. We also need to acknowledge that having an unsuccessful, a business is something that provides living not only for the employees, but for the employers as well. So we need to provide profit for the employers to keep on living and to sustain the building. So it is a measure of sustainability in a sense. If it is sustainable that at the same time you have a profit and at the same time you have well-being, this is obviously a win-win situation. So there is no way this can go wrong. So it is sustainable in that point, from that point of view.
So, Gijs, will you agree with that assessment? Or I guess you wrote the report together, so I hope so. So what's your take?
Yes, no, I do. No, I think that's exactly it, right? Yes, you could only look at productivity, but and I think Isabel pointed it out, and Giovanni as well. It's unlikely to be sustainable in the long run if you use a purely productivity-based approach. As much as if the company is hugely successful, probably everybody benefits and employees might be happy anyway, right? Because if the company is doing very, very well, they're probably being paid very, very well. So there are links in that sense as well. But in the end, and I think Isabel already pointed it out, given that the theoretic perspective that we use, which centers very strongly on motivation, the strongest motivation for employees is to believe that they're doing something useful and that they're part of an organization that they want to be a part of. And that's going to motivate them to go beyond the mere task description, and that will benefit everybody. I think, well, we haven't talked about bullshit jobs yet, but I think nobody wants to be in one, right? Maybe sometimes that needs a sort of a fictional narrative, but in principle, we're hoping to design jobs such that they also provide meaning to those that carry them out on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, thank you. I have another question that's kind of coming out as well, and that has to do with the digital transition. So is to what extent that the results can give us any hint towards the link between the high performant companies and the introduction of new technology. So, can the surveys tell us something about how the companies, what kind of strategies they should put in place to be able to kind of ride the digital transition to the results, so that it's easier to provide digital skills and make use of digital skills of the workers, and do we see a higher introduction of new technology? I think that Pär wants to get it on this one as well, but I'd like Giovanni and Gijs to give it a shot first, and maybe also to give us a hint about if there are any big sectoral or company type of divisions within the different groups that you have identified. We've talked about countries, but we haven't talked about sectors. Is there anything that's coming out on that account in terms of performance, please?
Okay. We saw that usually the high involvement, high investment group is doing relatively well, is relatively well represented in the group, among company with digitalize, and they also innovating. So I think there is a correlation there. How is this happening? The data cannot tell. We didn't explicitly link these two processes, but we saw a correlation there. So this is probably happening. If you look at the workplace innovation thing, there's a theme how the involvement of worker can actually lead to innovation, but not only in terms of introducing new technology, but also innovation in the form of changing the design of the product and having, let's say, a eureka moment on how the workplace is organized, leading to efficiency gains. All these things are happening, and this you can see as a form of innovation too. For the sectoral issues, I'm sorry, here I'm afraid this is the point where we cannot really give an answer because of the relatively small size of the survey. So we have like 20,000 establishments across of Europe, and if you start breaking it down by sectors, there are certain sectors that are extremely underrepresented. So we had to group it in like 4 or 5 macro sectors, but that means that our ability to carry out a sectoral analysis or type of business in a specific sector, this is not really feasible at this stage.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to add to this, or we should come to the end. And coming to the end, I know that Pär wanted to get in. I was talking about the digitalization, and you wanted to say something about this very briefly. I'll give you the opportunity to say that. But at the same time, I also want you to maybe give us the one sentence. What should we take home sentence from today's webinar? Out of what can we learn from the European Company Survey? What has the discussion kind of brought out? And what should we take home with us from today? Please, Pär, you get the first.
Well, when it comes to the digital transformation, I think you would get kind of the same results as looking at workplace well-being. So I liked what Giovanni stressed about the workplace rather than the relationship between employee and employer. And again, I think both Sweden and Finland is doing very well also when it comes to the digital transformation. And so I think this is also the tool for our ability to achieve the missions in the Green Deal and to actually be sustainable for real.
Okay, thank you. Isabel, please, what should we take home from today? You have to unmute.
Yeah. I found it important that in the next survey also the voice of the workers is better heard, and that more employee and trade unions representatives are involved in the survey, because we have also see in the research, but also today, that it's very important to involve workers by the policy, training policy, and the plans of the company.
Okay, Gijs, please.
We as trade unions can play a role in that. When it's possible, we can give support how to reach our representatives, and so I hope that it's possible.
Okay, thanks very much for the take home. And Gijs, what should we take home from the discussion today?
I think, I mean, if to go back to what you started with, companies at the moment are faced with an unprecedented challenge in terms of dealing with this COVID crisis. And I think our report shows that those businesses that take their employees a bit more seriously and work actively on trust relations between management and staff are more likely to be able to weather any of these big changes, be they the digitalization process, be they transformations in terms of the skills of the workers, or facing a challenge like this. And I think our report in that sense is very timely, that I do think it really provides some entry points for businesses to look at in order to improve the internal dialogue through trade unions, as well as directly with employees, in order to deal with the challenges they're faced with.
Okay, thank you very much. And Giovanni?
If I have to take a takeaway, would be a stab to answering the chicken and egg question. I think that if employment and employees can actually contribute to the company, what is really crucial is how management think about it, because they set the environment that makes all this possible. So supporting managers in understanding certain issues and helping them to create the right environment, to me, will be the crucial thing to take out from this report.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think this dovetails very much also with one of the questions that I didn't raise, which has to do with how managers are educated and whether there's something to learn from the Nordic education system in terms of how to educate managers. So there's still a couple of questions in the chat, and we'll get back to them as much as we can. But I think I would like to thank the speakers of today, panelists, for this discussion, kind of highlighting how one can combine workplace well-being with the company performance, and how skills use and skills development fit into this, how this investment strategy within the workplace fits into workplace performance and workplace well-being. With this, I would like to, close this workshop for today. Thank you all for having contributed. Thank for the active contributions in the chat box. And if you want to view, as I said in the beginning, the webinar again, you can go to Cedefop and Eurofound's websites, and there you can also actually download the report to get a bigger insight into what the methodologies, the more detailed results on the various aspects that have been raised today. So thank you very much, and have a nice day, and thanks for joining us. Bye.